surprise. It was the kind of laugh that empties a room, a sound made not with the mouth, but with contempt. She sat on the porch swing, barefoot, coffee in hand, her robe still tied loose like nothing in the world was about to collapse. I remember the soft hiss of the sheriff's cruiser tires on the gravel. I thought it was a neighbor. I even waved, but he didn't wave back. He walked up with two deputies, one older, one young and nervous. The older one held a folder with my name on it. He cleared his throat, said my name like a question. I stepped outside in socks, holding a mug I'd microwaved twice that morning. That's when I saw her already sitting there like she'd been waiting for them. For me. I asked, "What is this?" And she smiled, tilted her head like she was watching a child make a mess they couldn't clean. "You didn't read the fine print," she said, almost kind. Then she stood and handed the key to the deputy. My key. Our key. The one with the chipped Route 66 keychain I'd had since I was 19. The paper in the folder was stamped by the county clerk. Final foreclosure transfer, it said. But that wasn't the part that caught me. It was the new deed with her name and someone else's. Someone I didn't know. A man. A man who'd never paid a cent of the mortgage. A man who now legally owned what I built. The deputy didn't look at me. He said, "You have 10 minutes to collect personal items. Furniture and major possessions are now part of the estate." I laughed, that dry, stunned kind of laugh people do when they're trying not to cry. I said, "There's a mistake. This is my house." He didn't answer, just turned toward her. And that's when she laughed, low and full like a girl at the end of a prank. She leaned in close to me, close enough for me to smell the bergamot oil she always wore, and whispered, "We're not married anymore, remember? You signed that away too." I must have blacked out for a second. The air was thick, syrupy. I remember the cold of the porch rail under my palm like I was holding onto a ledge. Somewhere inside the clock in the kitchen ticked. That goddamn clock. I'd bought it for our first anniversary, a handmade piece with copper hands and an oak frame. She said it made the house feel like it had a heartbeat. Now it felt like it was mocking me. I walked inside. My legs felt like water. Everything looked the same. The blue curtains, the dent in the wall from when we tried to move the bookshelf. Even the mail on the table had my name on it. And yet I was now a trespasser in my own story. I grabbed what I could, a leather-bound notebook, my father's old watch, a sweatshirt that still smelled like the garage. I didn't look at the pictures. I didn't want to see our wedding photo or the one of us on that ferry to Catalina laughing into the sun. I didn't want to see her eyes. When I came back outside, she was gone. Her car, too. Just the deputies left, one of them now taping a county notice to the door. "Transfer of ownership, do not enter." The paper flapped in the wind like a white flag. I stood there for a long time, the box in my arms growing heavier by the second. A neighbor across the street peeked through the blinds. Nobody came out. Nobody said a word. That night, I slept in my truck outside the Vaughn's parking lot. I sat there with the windows cracked and the radio off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her on that swing. Calm, untouched, like none of it cost her anything. Like I was the fool who hadn't been paying attention. I wasn't stupid. I was trusting. There's a difference. I told myself that, over and over. But the truth was louder than any comfort I could conjure. She hadn't just taken my house. She took the version of me that believed in permanence. It started with love. At least I thought it did. You never know when you're stepping into something that's going to devour you. You think it's a door. Turns out it's a mouth. I met her at a fundraiser for a friend's school. She was behind the cupcake table, hair in a messy bun, smudges of frosting on her sleeve. I was drawn to her like heat to skin. We talked for 2 hours about nothing and everything: her dream of opening a bakery, my half-finished plans for remodeling the old family home. She laughed then too, but it was different. Lighter. Honest, I think. Back then, she said she just needed a chance. A push. Something solid to stand on. I didn't have much. A modest home. My parents left me decent credit. A decent job fixing HVAC systems. I had plans. I had the kind of quiet life most people run from. She said it felt safe. When she moved in, it was like color flooded the house. She painted the walls warm yellows, and soft greens filled the kitchen with the smell of butter and spice. She turned my Sunday mornings into something sacred: bare feet coffee and Van Morrison on vinyl. I started calling her Bird because she was always humming, always moving. And I loved her, deeply, stupidly. The bakery came next. She found the space an old shoe store near the corner of Main and Hill. She saw possibility. I saw a mortgage. But I trusted her. She made everything feel doable. She was magnetic that way. She didn't have the credit to get the lease, so I signed. She said she'd pay me back in 6 months. We'll be co-owners, she said. 50-50. I remember the exact way her eyes shimmered when she said it, like the future was already happening. She promised to draft up papers. Said her cousin was a paralegal. I didn't push. I wanted her to feel trusted. I even sold my truck that year, my dad's truck, the one he left me in his will, just to help with the first round of equipment. The ovens, the proofers, the custom glass display case. I remember the day they delivered it. She cried. Said no one had ever believed in her like that. She baked for 16 hours straight that night. Scones, cookies, little hand pies she wrapped in parchment and tied with string. I stayed up with her washing dishes, changing the playlists, making runs to the 24-hour grocer when she ran out of cream. At 3 a.m., she fell asleep on my lap on the bakery floor. I thought, this is it. We made something. We had a soft opening that Sunday. Word spread fast. She was on the front page of the town blog within a week. People called her the pastry whisperer. I beamed every time someone asked how I got so lucky. I told them she saved me. I thought it was true. What I didn't notice, what I chose not to notice, was how things started to tilt. She stopped saying we. It became her bakery, her brand. When reporters came, she introduced me as her partner, then stopped adding business. Eventually, I was just Rick. The guy who made the plumbing work. The guy who fixed the light over the register. Not a founder, not a co-owner. Just the man who showed up. I told myself it was ego. She needed the spotlight. I didn't. I liked the behind the scenes. I told myself we were building something long-term, and it didn't matter whose name was on the sign. What mattered was us. The dough, the donuts, the dream. But dreams don't protect you from paperwork. She never filed the co-ownership agreement. I asked gently 3 times. She said she'd talked to her cousin, said it was being drafted. I believed her. I always did. I should have known when her family started coming around more. The ones who never showed up to the wedding, never called. Suddenly they were consulting, offering advice. A man named Jordan started showing up, tall and polished, all slick talk and perfect teeth. She said he was helping with the books. I didn't ask questions. I didn't ask because the moment you start asking, the dream starts cracking, and I wasn't ready to wake up. One night I found her on the back steps smoking something she used to hate. She looked tired, not from baking, from something else. I sat beside her and asked, "You okay?" She nodded. Then she said, "If this goes big, everything changes. You know that, right?" I smiled. I said, "Good. We deserve that." She didn't smile back. Looking back now, I see it all. The slow fade, the decisions made in silence, the tiny doors she closed without telling me. I gave her everything I had, my name, my trust, my past and future. I built the scaffolding, and she climbed it, then kicked it out from under me. But back then, I was still believing, still holding her hand in the dark, thinking it was enough. It was the silence that changed first. Not the loud fights or the door slams, we never really did those. Just silence growing where warmth used to be. Mornings got quieter. She stopped waiting for me to pour her coffee. She stopped laughing at my bad jokes. She started locking the bathroom door. At first, I blamed the stress. The bakery was getting more attention. Local news had done a segment, and there were rumors a lifestyle magazine from LA wanted to do a spread. She said it was overwhelming, and I believed her. I tried to stay out of the way. Picked up more side jobs, worked weekends, told her I'd handle the bills for a few months so she could focus. I started coming home to untouched dinners. The meals I used to make her favorites, the ones I learned just for her, sat cold on the stove. I'd eat alone, pack up leftovers, and leave a note on the counter. "Get some rest. Proud of you." She stopped replying. Then the changes got sharper. She stopped calling me babe. Started saying Rick like it was a name she didn't recognize. Her eyes, they used to hold me. Now they scanned me like I was a customer she didn't have time for. And the passwords changed. Netflix, email, even the home Wi-Fi. I asked her why, and she said we needed more security. She stopped coming to bed. Said she worked better late. Some nights I'd hear the mixer going at 2 a.m. Other nights, silence. Her car gone. I didn't ask where she was, not at first. I didn't want to be the insecure husband. I wanted to trust her. That was always my mistake. Trust wasn't something she earned. It was something I gave away like candy. I started finding things. Empty wine bottles in the outside trash can. She never drank wine. Not around me. Expensive ones too, not the kinds we could afford when I was covering utilities alone. Once I found a receipt for a meal at an upscale restaurant I'd never heard of in a part of town we never went to. 2 entrees, a bottle of Syrah. I asked her about it casually. She said it was a business dinner with a vendor. I nodded. She kissed my cheek and said, "Don't be weird. Don't be weird." That stuck in my head for days, as if asking questions about a shared life made me odd, as if noticing the cracks was the problem, not the cracks themselves. We stopped touching. That was the hardest part. I'd reach for her in passing a hand on her back, a kiss to her shoulder, and she'd tense, or move, or act like she didn't notice. Affection became foreign, and so did I. One night I stood in the kitchen watching her bake. She didn't see me. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical. Flour in the air, butter in her hair, but no joy, no light. I realized then I didn't know what she loved anymore. I didn't know who she talked to during those long nights, or why she started turning her phone face down on the table. I tried talking to her. I asked if something was wrong. She shrugged. "It's just stress. You wouldn't get it." I asked if she still wanted this us. She said, "You're being dramatic." And that was it. No fight, no conversation, just a wall. I started staying at jobs longer, volunteering for overnight calls, anything to stay away from the quiet. It wasn't just that she was pulling away, it was that I couldn't find the path back. She was building a world I wasn't invited into. I used to be her beginning and end. Now I was somewhere in the footnotes. Then came the emails. I only saw them once by accident. I was printing a receipt from our shared computer, the old one, in the hallway nook. Her inbox was still open. I didn't mean to read anything, I swear. But the subject lines were hard to ignore. He doesn't suspect. We'll talk after settlement. Get the paperwork in before the refi. My heart sank. The messages weren't long, just enough to unravel everything I thought we had. I confronted her, calmly. I asked who Jordan really was. She said he was a consultant. I asked why he was talking about refinancing our house. Her face didn't change. No fear, no shame. Just a slight smirk, like I'd finally caught up to the game she was playing. "You don't understand how business works," she said. That night I slept in my truck again. Not because I had to, but because I couldn't sleep beside a stranger who wore my last name like it was a price tag she'd already peeled off. I told myself I'd wait. I'd give her time. I told myself we were just in a rough patch, that maybe things would level out. But deep down I knew. You always know when someone's leaving, they just haven't told you yet. And in that silence, I began grieving a marriage that hadn't officially ended. I mourned the woman who once danced barefoot on our kitchen tiles, the one who used to fall asleep mid-sentence because she trusted me to listen even when she couldn't finish. I didn't realize I'd already been replaced. I was holding on to a memory, not a person. The letter came on a Tuesday. Ordinary morning dew still on the grass, my coffee still too hot to drink. I almost missed it tucked between junk mail and a water bill. The envelope was heavy, the kind that usually carries disappointment. My name was typed. No return address. I opened it at the kitchen table, the table I built, the one with the uneven legs she used to joke about every time her wine glass tilted. I opened the envelope expecting an ad, a bill, a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. The first page was from a law firm, cold language, professional font, notice of legal removal, business partnership termination. My name was listed not as a client, as a former partner. I read it twice, then again, mouth dry, ears ringing. I looked for her name. It was there, signed in ink. The bottom line read, "Effective immediately ownership and managerial control are transferred in full to Ms. Dana Elwood." I thought I'd misunderstood. So I flipped to the second page, then the third. They were clean, clinical, and terrifying. Financials, asset transfer tables, and a clause I didn't recognize, one that referenced a refinancing agreement on our home. Our home. I called her, straight to voicemail. I texted, "We need to talk. Right now." No reply. I waited. An hour passed. 2. I drove to the bakery. The lights were on. People inside. I parked in the alley behind Heart Pounding. I had a key still, or so I thought. But the door didn't turn. They'd changed the locks. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. A man I'd never seen opened it halfway, stood in the doorway like he owned the place. Maybe he did. Maybe he was the name on that paper I couldn't forget. "Can I help you?" he asked with that practiced calm some people use when they're trying to assert power. "I'm Rick," I said. "Dana's husband." He blinked. Ex-husband, right? That's when I knew. He handed me a cardboard box without speaking. Inside were a few baking notes, ones I'd written years ago during our first recipe trials, and a folder. I opened it there on the sidewalk. Inside were documents. A copy of the original loan. My signature or something like it. It didn't look right. The stroke was off too clean. But it was mine on paper at least. The folder also contained a quitclaim deed. My name crossed out. Hers and Jordan's listed below. The date 3 months ago. I staggered. That's the only word I can use. My body felt foreign, slow, like someone had poured sand into my joints. "You should talk to your attorney," the man said, and shut the door. I stood there holding the box, staring at the peeling paint of the back entrance. A place I once unlocked every morning at 4 a.m. to prep with her. A place where I once belonged. I drove to the county records office. It took 2 hours to get someone to speak to me. The clerk confirmed what I feared. The house had been refinanced 6 months earlier. I wasn't listed on the new paperwork. My name had been removed after the divorce finalized. I said, "What divorce?" She looked at me puzzled. "Sir, it's in the file. You signed the settlement." No, I didn't. She rotated the screen toward me. I saw a digital scan of a signature. My name. My handwriting almost. But the slant was wrong. The K in my name curled at the end like a tail. I'd never written it like that. My stomach turned. I felt the blood drain from my face. My signature had been forged on more than one document, and it had been accepted, recorded, legally binding. I left without speaking, drove until I didn't know where I was. I parked behind a strip mall and just sat there gripping the wheel, thinking about every time I told her I trusted her. Every time I said, "Do what you need to. I've got your back." I'd handed her the keys to my life, and she changed the locks. That night I couldn't sleep. I spread out every document I still had across the motel desk. Receipts, texts, emails, the original loan application I'd printed myself. I circled dates, compared signatures. I called a friend who knew a lawyer. It took 3 days to get an appointment. When I finally sat across from the attorney, I laid everything out. I told him the story. He was kind, careful with his words, but I could see it in his eyes. The damage was already done. "She built this slowly," he said, "and she covered her tracks. We can challenge it, the signature, the loan, even the property transfer, but you're looking at a long, expensive fight. And even if we win one part of it, it won't bring everything back." I nodded hollow. "She committed fraud," I whispered. He nodded. "But proving it, that's another mountain." I walked out of that office with a folder full of hope stapled shut by reality. Even justice, it seemed, had a waiting list. Even truth needed money to be heard. I didn't cry. I haven't cried since. But something in me cracked that week. Not because I lost her. Not even because I lost the house. It was because I lost the version of me who believed that love on its own was enough to protect you. Courtrooms aren't made for people like me. They're made for theater, for paperwork and procedure and who has the cleaner collar. I wore the only suit I had, the one from our wedding. It hung looser now. I'd lost weight, or maybe just something heavier than flesh. She sat on the other side of the room in navy blue hair, pinned back makeup, sharp eyes dry. I didn't recognize her. I'd seen that face in magazines, not the ones you read, the ones you skim in line at the pharmacy. Cold, composed, flawless. She didn't look at me. Her lawyer was younger than I expected. Slick. Confident. He greeted the judge like they knew each other. Maybe they did. I sat with my own attorney, a good man named Hal, who wore worn shoes and asked me if I'd eaten that morning. I hadn't. The bailiff called our case. The judge adjusted his glasses. Hal stood and began outlining the fraud. The forged documents. The surprise foreclosure. The business paperwork that vanished. The forged signature on a quitclaim deed. He referenced the forensic handwriting analysis we managed to get paid for with the last of my savings. This man was misled, manipulated, and illegally stripped of his property, Hal said. All under the guise of a partnership and a marriage that we will prove were leveraged with malicious intent. It was all true. Then her lawyer stood, and I heard the story I wasn't ready for. He called me erratic, unstable, emotionally manipulative. He said I'd abandoned the business, said I'd harassed Dana, called her at all hours, showed up uninvited. He played audio clips, me crying, desperate, one where I begged her to talk to me, to come home, another where I cursed, not at her, at myself, after finding the forged document. He twisted them into something ugly. She feared for her safety, he said. I felt my ears burn. My hands shook. Hal squeezed my knee under the table, whispered, "Stay calm." But the damage was already done. I looked at the judge, at the clerk, at the people in the back row waiting for their own cases. None of them saw me. They saw a man unraveling. Then she took the stand. She didn't flinch. She didn't falter. She said I was controlling, said I'd discouraged her from success, that I'd tried to take credit for her dream. She cried at the right moments, dabbed at tears I couldn't see, spoke about sleepless nights and fear. I tried to end things peacefully, she said, but he wouldn't let go. When it was Hal's turn to question her, he brought out the emails, the receipts, the inconsistencies in the timeline, the forged signature and the bank transaction in her name the same day the documents were signed. She stuttered once, just once, but it was enough to see the crack. Her lips tightened, her eyes sharpened. I don't recall, she said again and again. I don't remember signing that. When I took the stand, I told the truth. Every bit of it. I told them how we met, how I helped fund the bakery, how I signed on faith. I showed them the call logs, the timeline, the text messages where she called me partner and rock and forever. I spoke slowly, clearly. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but I didn't. When it was over, the judge called for a recess. Hal turned to me, said, "It could go either way. You were strong, but I already knew." The next day, the judge ruled. No fraud, he said. Insufficient evidence. The matter of property division, while unfortunate, falls under civil jurisdiction. This court does not find sufficient basis to proceed with criminal charges. Dana's lawyer smiled. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like I'd just walked through a fire that left no scars, just silence. I didn't look back. I didn't speak. Hal offered to appeal. Said we had grounds. But I didn't answer. Not then. Outside, the sun was blinding. People were laughing nearby. I couldn't hear what about. I stood there in that too big suit, clutching a folder full of truths no one wanted to hear. Dana walked past me. Her heels clicked against the courthouse steps. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes said it all. I had lost, and she had never planned to lose. That night I took the documents, all of them, and burned them in a metal barrel behind the motel. Watched them curl and blacken. Watched her name disintegrate in fire. Not out of rage, but because I didn't want to carry her into my next breath. I sat there long after the fire died, letting the ash settle on my shoes, on my skin. I wasn't a victim. I was a man who gave everything to someone who saw that as permission to take more. But that wasn't the end. Because something inside me, something quiet, something buried, had survived. I moved into a room above a mechanic's shop on the edge of town, the kind of place that smells like rubber and oil and stale coffee. It had one window, a twin bed, and a sink that groaned every time I turned the handle. The walls were thin, and some nights I could hear the guy next door talking in his sleep, fragments of arguments, maybe dreams. I kept the light low and the radio off. The first few days I didn't unpack, just lived out of boxes, not because I was planning to leave, but because I couldn't bear the sound of settling. Settling meant staying. Staying meant admitting this was real. There was a quiet in that room I hadn't felt in years. Not the silence of abandonment, I'd lived through that. This was different. This was the silence of something beginning, something small and raw and unformed. I started waking up early again. Not because I had anywhere to be, I didn't. The bakery was gone, the house gone, the marriage gone. I woke up because sleep was a stranger, and the mornings gave me the illusion of control. A clean slate every 12 hours. I found work at a small bread shop 2 towns over. The owner was a kind man named Jorge who didn't ask too many questions. He needed someone to prep before dawn mixed dough clean trays. The pay was modest, the hours brutal, but my hands knew the rhythm. Knead, fold, rest, repeat. There was something sacred in the repetition. Something that reminded me of who I was before her. I didn't tell Jorge about the bakery, or the lawsuit, or the forged papers. He only knew I had experience. That was enough. He gave me keys within the first week. Trust clean and quiet like a handshake that didn't demand anything back. Some mornings when I was alone in the kitchen, I'd hum. Not because I was happy, but because there was space to be human again. I remembered how she used to hum when she was focused. I hated that memory, but it lived in my throat. I let it be. I rented a post office box and changed all my accounts, left no forwarding address. I needed space to forget, to unhook myself from a life that had become poisoned by someone else's ambition. A few weeks after the ruling, I got a letter in that box. No return name, but I knew the handwriting. I almost didn't open it. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. Inside was a note, just one line. You always said you'd survive anything. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a sentence like a dare. I burned that too. Some nights I'd drive past the old house, not to watch, not to torture myself, just to remind myself it was real, that it had happened. One time I saw a woman painting the porch, not Dana, someone new. She had a toddler beside her chasing a toy car down the walkway I built with my father. She was painting over the swing. I stayed long enough to see the last of it turn blue, a soft ocean blue. I remembered how Dana hated that color, said it reminded her of sadness. I smiled a small broken thing and drove away. In time, I started building small things again. I carved a spice rack out of scrap wood, started journaling something I hadn't done since college. The words came slow, but they came, like sap from a tree that's been cut deep. Jorge let me experiment with some of the old recipes. We started selling brioche on Fridays, then sourdough on Sundays. He let me name them. I picked names that meant something only to me. My dad's old CB radio call signed the road where I first kissed someone under a storm. Each loaf sold out, not because of nostalgia, but because they were good, real. I never told anyone the full story, not coworkers, not the neighbor downstairs who lent me his spare blanket that first cold night. Not even Jorge, though I think he knew in the way some men know another's wounds without asking. And maybe that was enough. I'd lost the house. Yes, the bakery. My name on a business, my name on a deed. I'd lost trust and warmth and the kind of quiet faith you place in someone when you see your whole future in their eyes. But I found something else. A different kind of quiet. One that didn't demand. One that healed. Some nights I still dream of her laugh. The one from that porch swing. It echoes in the back of my skull like a wound that forgot how to close. But in the dream I never turn around. I let her laugh and I keep walking. And that somehow is enough. There's something no one tells you about rebuilding. It isn't loud. It doesn't come with announcements or milestones. There's no music swelling in the background. It's just small choices. Choosing not to call. Choosing not to check. Choosing to stay one more day in a life that doesn't resemble the one you lost. I stopped marking anniversaries. The day we met, the day we married, the day it all collapsed. They passed like shadows barely acknowledged. I didn't need reminders. The ache had its own clock. I started noticing things again, the way the air shifted before dawn, the warmth of dough beneath my hands, the way light moved across the wooden floor of the bakery at 6:13 a.m. There was peace in precision. I could predict the rise of sourdough better than I could predict a person's heart. Jorge offered me more hours than part of the back kitchen, said I could use it for my own projects after closing. Just clean up after yourself, he said. That's simple. No contracts, no hidden clauses. I said yes. I went slow. Brought in an old mixer I bought off a retired chef. Built shelves from pallets I found behind the feed store. Started testing recipes after dark things I'd scribbled years ago, ones she'd never liked. Too rustic, she once said. Too plain. Now they tasted like freedom. I called the line Midnight Batch. It wasn't a brand, just a label I hand-wrote on brown paper. Jorge let me sell a few loaves each weekend. People noticed. They asked who made them. He'd point to me and I'd nod but say nothing. Let the bread speak. One day an older woman came in holding one of my loaves. She looked at the label, then at me. You wrote this, she said. I nodded. She smiled. You've got a sorrow in your handwriting. But the bread's got joy. I didn't know what to say. I just thanked her and rang her up. But her words stayed with me. You've got sorrow in your handwriting. But the bread's got joy. It was the truest thing anyone had said in years. That night I sat in the back kitchen and wrote it down. Then I wrote more. I wrote about the porch swing, about the courtroom, about the ash. I didn't stop for hours. When I looked up, the sky had turned a soft lavender, and the birds had started singing. I wasn't writing for justice anymore, or revenge. I wasn't writing to be heard. I was writing because it was the only way I knew to return to myself. Eventually, Jorge offered me a small stake in the business. Said he was thinking of retiring in a few years. I didn't answer right away. I was afraid. Afraid to hope again. But hope isn't something you choose. It's something that grows in silence beneath the wreckage. I said yes. Quietly. We had papers drawn up, real ones, reviewed, notarized. I read every line, twice. When I signed my name, my hand didn't shake. Months later, I saw Dana again, not in person, on a magazine cover at the market. The Queen of Crumb, it said. She was holding a croissant, eyes lit like she'd never seen fire. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of longing, not out of hate, just curiosity. She'd won. She got what she wanted. The bakery, the house, the brand, maybe even happiness. But as I looked at her photo polished perfect, I realized something I hadn't before: she didn't know how to stay. She knew how to build, how to charm, how to take. But staying, that's where the quiet work happens. The long, boring, faithful labor of love. She never wanted that. She wanted the win. I left the magazine on the rack and went back to the kitchen where Jorge was dusting a tray of sweet rolls and cursing at the radio. That night, I baked a batch of honey wheat bread and left one loaf on the counter for a customer who always came late. I labeled it with a note, "For the long roads." No name, just those words. Because survival isn't about who sees you rise. It's about learning to rise when no one's watching. Fall came early that year. The trees outside the bakery dropped their leaves like they were tired of holding on. I understood. Some days I felt the same, brittle at the edges, shedding parts of myself without meaning to. But I also felt rooted. For the first time in years, I wasn't running. I was still, and it didn't scare me. Jorge handed me a ring of keys one morning. "I'm heading to Baja for a few weeks," he said. "Don't burn the place down." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I could. Because I had a reason to. Running the shop solo was more than work. It was a test. Could I manage the chaos? Could I handle the early deliveries? The flaky ovens, the regular who wanted everything gluten-free but still expected the sourdough to have soul? I could. I did. I brought in a younger kid from the community college, taught him the ropes. His name was Marcus, all energy and questions. He reminded me of myself when I still thought loyalty was a kind of armor. I didn't tell him my story, just showed him how to cut the proofed dough with a steady hand and how to tell when the crust was lying to you. During those weeks alone, I found a rhythm that felt like breathing. Early mornings, still music, the warmth of flour rising in air that still held the chill of dawn. I'd close my eyes sometimes and feel like I was back in my father's kitchen kneading with him while he hummed old country songs. I started writing letters I never sent, to Dana, to the judge, to the version of me that once believed contracts were enough to keep someone honest. I didn't write to get answers. I wrote to empty the drawer. One night I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me, some foolish flicker did. It was her. "Hi, Rick." I didn't speak. "I saw the new breads. Someone sent me a picture from your shop. Midnight batch." I waited. I liked the name, she said. Still, I said nothing. I wanted to say, "I'm glad you're okay." I closed my eyes, inhaled. She waited. Silence full and heavy. "I don't hate you," I said finally. There was a long pause. I think she expected more, or maybe less. "Okay," she said. "That's more than I deserve." "Yes," I said, and ended the call. I didn't save the number. That night I took a walk through the neighborhood behind the shop. The air was sharp, the sky clear. I passed kids drawing with chalk on the sidewalk, a man tuning a guitar on his porch, a couple arguing softly near a parked car. Life in all its small violences and victories. And I felt something shift. Not a revelation, not some grand catharsis. Just a loosening, like a knot coming undone after years of being pulled too tight. I returned to the shop and sat in the back watching the dough rise. I thought about all the things I'd lost and all the things that loss had made room for. Not better, not cleaner, just real. That weekend, Marcus asked if I'd ever consider teaching a baking class. He said there were folks in town who wanted to learn, and I had a way of making it feel like more than just food. I said I'd think about it, but I already knew. Teaching, sharing, not for profit, not for power, just because the knowledge had to go somewhere, had to live beyond me. The next Sunday we held the first workshop. 3 people showed up. I taught them how to braid challah and listen for that soft knock when the loaf is ready to leave the oven. One woman cried when her first loaf came out golden and whole, said she never thought she could make anything that felt like home. I understood that too well. I started ending each class with a quiet reminder: bread doesn't judge the hands that shape it. They thought it was a baking tip, but it was a truth I'd learned too late. In rebuilding, I found corners of myself I didn't know were still intact. Kindness that hadn't been mined out, patience that wasn't performative, joy that didn't depend on anyone else staying. I still walk with a limp, not one you can see, but one you feel if you stay close long enough. Some wounds don't close. They grow around you. They become part of the architecture, but they don't have to make you cruel. They can make you careful, and careful people. We build slowly, but we build things that last. Winter settled in quietly. No big storms, no drama, just a steady dimming of the days, the kind of cold that lives in your coat seams and never quite leaves your fingers. I liked it. There was something honest about the season. It didn't pretend to be anything else. The bakery stayed warm, not just in temperature, but in spirit. We painted the walls a shade of deep green. Someone brought in string lights. Marcus started playing jazz in the mornings. Real jazz, not the kind that tries to be background noise. The regulars noticed. They said the place felt different now, softer, less curated, like it was breathing again. One afternoon, a woman came in asking for a custom order, said her daughter was turning 6 and wanted bread instead of cake. I smiled. "Smart kid," I said. The woman looked around, lowered her voice. "Are you the one who used to be with Dana Elwood?" I paused. "Yes." She looked embarrassed. "Sorry, I saw a piece about her online. She's doing well." I nodded. "She didn't mention you," the woman added. "I just remembered you from the old bakery. You were always there early." I smiled. Not tight, not bitter. Just a real smile. "Yeah," I said. "That sounds about right." We finished the order: some soft milk rolls, a braided loaf, and a dozen tiny honey biscuits shaped like stars. The girl's favorite. I packed them in a box with a handwritten card and no name. The woman left. I never saw her again, but it stayed with me. That absence. The fact that I was written out of the version of success people recognized. That she had become a story without me and I had become something else entirely. Not a headline, not a hashtag, just a man who kept baking. I saw the bakery once more, her bakery, not inside, just drove past it on the way to a delivery. The sign was new slicker. The windows were pristine, the sidewalk scrubbed clean of the chalk hearts kids used to draw. It looked like money, like brand deals and board meetings. Not a crumb in sight. I felt nothing. Not rage, not grief, just a recognition. That used to be mine. But so did that version of me. And I let both go. Back at our shop, mine and Jorge's now fully shared, I watched Marcus shape dough like it was a living thing. He was good, fast, but not careless. He'd started adding his own touches, citrus zest in the rye, rosemary folded into the focaccia. I encouraged it. That's how things grow. One night after closing, I found myself alone. Everyone had left. The street outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around you like a thick coat. I stood at the window and watched the reflection of the space behind me. The ovens, the racks, the bowls still dusted with flour. My life as it was now. I pulled out a bottle I'd been saving, not wine, not whiskey, just a dark ginger soda from a local vendor. I poured it into a chipped mug and toasted the empty room. To what survived, I said aloud. I thought about calling someone, not her, not someone else. But the urge passed. Instead, I walked to the back, rolled out a fresh sheet of dough, and started something new. No recipe, no plan, just instinct, muscle memory, the kind of creation that doesn't announce itself until it's already done. It didn't matter what it became. What mattered was that it was mine. I went home late that night, climbed the narrow stairs to my apartment, the one I'd now lived in longer than the house she took. I unlocked the door, turned on the single lamp, and sat at the tiny kitchen table. There beside my notebook was the first letter I'd written and never sent, still sealed, still weighted with words I no longer needed to deliver. I picked it up, felt its weight, and then carefully tore it in half. I didn't burn it, didn't throw it away, just let it fall into the empty breadbasket in the center of the table. A symbol, maybe, or just a quiet decision, that some things are better when they feed no one. The first snow came like a whisper, late, soft, barely sticking to the ground. It coated the bakery window in a shimmer that made everything inside feel gentler. Marcus made hot chocolate for the regulars. I stood in the doorway watching the flakes dissolve before they landed. Business slowed for the season as it always does. But I didn't mind. The stillness was a gift. We'd made enough to last the winter. Jorge was back from Baja tanned and full of stories I half believed. He slapped me on the back and said, "You kept the place standing." I didn't correct him. The truth was, it was the place that had kept me. One morning I arrived earlier than usual. The sun hadn't broken the horizon, and the air outside was sharp, the kind that wakes you up from the inside out. I unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and let the warmth rise like breath from the ovens. I made a batch of honey oat rolls, just for the scent, that deep, comforting sweetness that reminded me of mornings in my childhood, of a life before betrayal taught me the limits of love. I thought about legacy, not in the grand way people usually mean it, not about names carved into signs or faces in newspapers. I thought about what we leave in the quiet, in the flour, caught in the cracks of the floorboards, in the way a kid smiles when their first loaf turns golden. That, I realized, was enough. I started teaching twice a week. Some nights it was just 2 or 3 people. Other nights the room filled up. We'd laugh, burn things, learn patience together. I never told them my story, but sometimes I'd catch a look, someone recognizing something in my eyes. Grief, maybe, or endurance. They never asked. I never offered. A young woman came regularly. She'd lost her brother the year before. Said baking made her feel close to him again. Another man was recently divorced, trying to learn how to feed himself again. Not just food, but something deeper. Everyone came for a different reason, but they all stayed for the same one, the doing, the kneading, the slow creation of something honest. One evening after a class, Marcus pulled me aside. You ever think about opening another shop? I looked at him at the hope in his voice. Maybe I said, but not yet. He nodded. He understood. The truth was, I didn't need bigger, just deeper. I wanted to stay rooted, to keep building where the ground had already proven strong. And I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that comes from having survived more than you thought you could. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I still passed the old house sometimes. The porch had a new swing. The paint was different. I never slowed down, never looked too long. That chapter had closed. She never called again. Never wrote. I don't know where she is now or if she thinks about me at all. But it doesn't matter. Some endings don't need clarity, just distance. One night I came home after closing and stood at my window. The city was quiet. Snow clung to the edges of the rooftops. I thought about the beginning, how love once had felt like salvation, and how losing it had nearly undone me. But here I was, whole in a way I never expected to be. Not clean, not perfect, but real and free. Some wounds never vanish. They just stop bleeding. You learn to live with the scar, to trace its outline when the nights go still. You learn the shape of your silence and the sound of your own breath when it's no longer trying to keep someone else alive. She took what she came for, and in her leaving, she left behind something I didn't expect: the truth of myself stripped of illusion, standing upright. I still flinch at porch swings, still pause when I see signatures. But I also laugh again. Not often, not loud, but real. And when the bread rises just right, when the crust cracks like a whisper and the smell fills the room, I remember what it means to make something with your own hands. Some treasures had been recovered. Others, more valuable, still had been discovered for the first time. It wasn't the ending I'd expected. It was better, harder, clearer, more honest. It was mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.